What sorts of paintings will be hanging in the museums of the future? Agnieszka Pilat thinks we'll be looking at what she calls heroic portraits of machines, fine art renderings of the technology that freed the modern world from the bone and soul-crushing labor that our parents and grandparents endured. Pilat's paintings, especially ones featuring Spot, the Boston Dynamics robot dog, are sought after by Silicon Valley collectors drawn to her valorization of technology, a welcome alternative to the traditional demonization by artists of the man-made world. Her work is rich in callbacks to artists ranging from Da Vinci to Duchamp to Warhol, and she incorporates augmented reality to further highlight how technology shapes our perceptions. A sure sign of success? One of her paintings appears in the Matrix sequel released last year as a representation of art in the future. Born in Poland in 1973, Pilat remembers life under communism as an extended period of conformity and repression that ended almost immediately the moment that the Polish regime collapsed in 1989. She talks about how her father, able finally to operate his own shop, stopped drinking and built a prosperous bakery business. Pilat emigrated to the United States in the early 2000s, landing in San Francisco, where she encountered amazingly wealthy tech workers espousing the same collectivist ideas that had made her childhood so miserable. I was just really shocked, she recalls. I didn't realize that people still think that communism or socialism is a good idea. Moral outrage was growing within me, and also a feeling that I need to protect America by telling people what it really means. Shortly after arriving in the States, Pilat stumbled across the work of another Eastern European immigrant, Ayn Rand. Though she didn't become an objectivist, Pilat responded viscerally to Rand's insistence that you have a right and a moral obligation to yourself to have a purpose and work towards the purpose as hard as you can. As her work gains in stature, Pilat is moving on to a new frontier, if not quite a final one. She's an artist in residence at Elon Musk's SpaceX, where she's looking forward to possibly producing super-heroic portraits of machines in zero gravity. Reason talked with her in her New York studio about being upstaged by a robot dog, why she wants everyone to remember what communism was really like, and how to best appreciate and protect the economic and cultural freedom we too often take for granted.
Agnieszka Pilat, thanks for talking to Reason.
Thank you, Nick. Great to be here.
So let's talk about Renaissance 2.0, a show that you had last fall. What are you trying to accomplish with portraits of machines?
Generally, I describe it that I am a portrait painter, but to be relevant in today's story, the portraiture needs to reflect whoever holds power. I like to say that if Andy Warhol were alive, he wouldn't be painting Marilyn Monroe, he'd be painting the machines.
When you talk about that the machines hold power, how do you mean that?
Sure. I think I might probably call them like they're like a benevolent dictators.
Okay.
So I think we are leaning to it, and they have tremendous power in that sense, but it's by choice. I mean, the cell phone, we can turn it off anytime we want. So we choose to give them power.
You say your patrons are actually the machines of the future. I work for the machine, not the man.
Yes, my concept is that how I go to a museum today, or you go to a museum today, and you look at portraiture, and you think these are my ancestors. I want to believe that if artificial intelligence and thinking machines progress, 100 years from now, 200 years from now, they're going to come and look at the portraits I painted of all their machines, and they're going to think these are our ancestors. So in that sense, I feel like I'm building Museum of the Future.
One of the pieces of technology you've been working with for a while now is Spot, the Boston Dynamics robot. Can you describe it?
Sure. So Spot is what technically is called quadruple robot, or cobot, which is a robot that's meant to cooperate with humans. I describe it as a walking drone. It has built-in artificial intelligence, but more so athletic intelligence, means it really understands the environment very well.
So it's got like sensors in its eyes where it's taking in data and information from its surroundings.
Correct, and you can put on top of it what's called load, and one of the load is a robotic arm. And so when I work with Spot, when I paint, that's what we use, the robotic arm.
How do you control Spot?
When I paint, I really like operating it manually. So it's almost like an extension of my arm. And
so it's like being back in art school, but you're the teacher this time.
Yeah, correct. That's why the pieces are also kind of like almost like children finger painting, because Spot is really embryonic artist. He's just learning.
How obvious that this was painted by a human and this was painted by a machine?
Yeah, so they're very different. My work is what I would call contemporary realism, and Spot works with pure abstraction. It's very line-driven, and I appreciate having fun with the technology because it allowed me to enter that space of abstraction without feeling like I'm a sellout and I'm trying to, do what's popular.
Are you figuring Spot is going to be like a cardinal in Renaissance Italy that you would draw the picture of?
I think Spot is the first celebrity robot. If Warhol were alive, he'd be totally obsessed with Spot because
He'd
Spot
be
is the celebrity.
painting with Spot instead of Basquiat.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. Or Pollack.
One of your best-known paintings of Spot is a pastiche or an homage to Nude Descending a Staircase. How does Duchamp fit into your kind of painterly world?
When I was at Boston Dynamics, and I went there just with an intention of painting a portrait of Spot. But then when I saw the robot go up and down the stairs, it was just instantly for me, oh, this is a Duchamp moment and I have to innovate. So I'm very grateful to Duchamp for that moment for me. And that's why I started doing augmented reality, because I thought, okay, the painting has to be really very innovative. It was the first augmented reality painting in my career and it changed me a lot.
You were born in Poland and you grew up there. What was the first piece of technology that you were like, oh my God, I am entranced by this?
Oh my God, Walkman.
Yeah.
Do you remember time when you put the Walkman on and you start talking very loud? Oh my God, this is so great. I remember my brother had a Walkman. And I remember that moment putting it on your parents or a friend, and all of a sudden they're screaming out loud. But till today, I remember that experience.
You were born in 1973, so you remember communism, which oftentimes figured kind of citizens as cogs in a machine. Talk a little bit about what was it like to grow up in communist Poland?
Let me tell you a story, how I grew up. It's a Christmas morning, and we wake up, and my mom is running around and very unhappy. I'm like, well, what happened? I overslept. She looked out the window, look at the line in front of the grocery store. There's a huge line. By the time I get there, this is going to be the worst Christmas. Everything is going to be sold out. It's horrible. But this was during the Marshall State, so there was curfew. So you were not allowed to be on the street before, 8 a.m. or something. But people would line up quietly because they wanted to get food. And that morning, police came with big vans. They put everyone in the vans. My mom in the window was like, oh my God, this is the best thing ever. She got dressed fast and she was the first in the store. And I remember that Christmas was like the best Christmas ever because she was like first in line, she could buy anything. And then what they would do, they wouldn't kill, so they would do annoying things because Poland wasn't that violent, but they would drive you out in the countryside, they let you out, you have to walk all the way home for hours. So
that was the punishment?
So, for people you take 100 people from the street because they were early, so they weren't political enemies, but we're going to teach you a lesson.
Wow. What else do you remember about Poland before the end of the communist regime?
I remember just lack of hope, to look for the future. It didn't matter you worked a lot or a little, you were paid the same. So I remember the despair in my father's life, drinking. And then I remember 1989 when market economy opened up and Poland did something pretty interesting. They really let people buy out businesses they worked for on pretty good terms. My entire life, family life, changed from one day to another because they just became such a good team and they built a wonderful business within 10 years.
Yeah. You came to the U.S. in the early aughts, 2004, and you headed to San Francisco. How did you feel about San Francisco when you got there?
I mean, it was great. I loved the weather and all that, but I was very confused about kind of cultural and political views people held in the Valley, and especially in San Francisco city itself. At first, it was surprise, disappointment, and then call to arms, actually.
So talk about that. When you say you were surprised by the views that people held, what do you mean?
I didn't realize that people still think that communism or socialism is a good idea. People in Silicon Valley as a whole, their ideal is very much aligned with what I consider very immoral system that I grew up in Poland. So they're very generous. So it kind of reflects American spirit of being generous and charity. What they don't understand is that it doesn't work in practical terms, and then they don't come in terms with their own guilt, that they have guilt that they've done well.
I guess this is a good place to mention that you also encountered Ayn Rand, and you told a writer from New York Magazine recently that I would not be the artist that I am without that book, meaning Atlas Shrugged. What is the message that you drew from her work?
This was the first time I saw a moral justification for capitalism. And I always knew capitalism worked because I saw it from my childhood. I saw communism, I saw the transition, I saw it from my whole community.
What's the essence of that moral defense?
That I think that your obligation is to you first. I mean, Rand connects a lot to politics. Her moral system were more interesting to me, actually, in a sense, again, that you have a right and a moral obligation to yourself to have a purpose and work toward the purpose as hard as you can.
People who are buying your paintings and whatnot, they are tech lords, right? They are, centimillionaires, if not billionaires. Are you flattering them by kind of not painting portraits of them, but of technology and machines in a way that makes them the new aristocracy?
Well, as artists, I would have to say we always work for patrons. That's what we do. And I don't want to be a starving artist. So patron is very important to me, and patronage is very important to me. And Michelangelo, he worked for a patron too.
Right.
And I would argue the best artists always work for patrons.
Is that also because the patrons end up loving the artwork and they give you a lot of freedom?
Yes, correct. They come, they see something, appreciate something you're at, and it's a symbiotic relationship. I'm not flattering them. I'm telling the story I believe in, and I think they see that story. I want to be part of that story.
You also said that, and I'm quoting here from New York Magazine, they're all egomaniacs.
Oh, God.
They're all wrapped up in themselves. It's like talking to a fish out of water. They just don't get it. What does that mean?
Okay, so I have to say that quote was a bit, there was a long conversation I had with Sean, who is great, the writer, and it's hard for them to relate to day-to-day stuff. And they shouldn't. I mean, I had the conversation with actually Richard Branson, and I made the case to him that I think he contributes so much to humanity, but not just in terms of the economic value, but he's so inspiring. I think the culture of resentment and egalitarianism to the total absurdity, I'm very much against that. I think some people are leaders and their whole life is about contributing, and it's okay if they are, have a bit more economic value. I don't resent that. And it sounds cheesy, but I love America. This is my service to America as an immigrant from Eastern Europe. And, I play the game like Warhol. I want to be sell and successful because that's the only way for the work to be seen. And that's ultimately why I paint, because I want to tell that story. And that's the only thing we have control over. And we have to learn to get value just from that.
What's next for you? You're going to be an artist in residence for a space company, right?
Yeah, I am in conversation with SpaceX. So my machines, I call them portrait of machines or heroic portrait of machines. And now I want to do what's super heroic portrait of machines. So that has to be space.
And when you say do something in space, hopefully you'll be going into space and creating in a zero gravity or upper orbit.
Well, I don't know about that. We'll see what happens. For now, the first step I really want to do is to just go to Texas and see technology from up close, see what excites me about it.
You would go in space if you could.
If I could, yeah. I wouldn't think twice about it. Yeah.
That's the ultimate migration, right?
The ultimate migration, yes. True, yeah.
I think we're going to leave it there. Agnieszka Pilat, thanks so much for talking to Reason.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.